Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 224 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is part one of a two-part interview with firefighter Chris Baker. Chris was at the time working at the Chevron Richmond Refinery and was on duty for a leak and then subsequent fire that proved to be a significant near-miss event. But before we jump into my interview with Chris, I have an announcement. We have another sponsor. From the beginning, Midwest Fire has been and remains our title sponsor, and for that I am so thankful to them for the support of our mission. Joining Midwest Fire now is Chief Joel Miller. Chief Miller has the world's largest following on Instagram, and he's putting out some massive amounts of valuable content daily on his feed, many times daily, in fact. I am so excited to have Chief Miller on board as the sponsor of the SA Matters show. Welcome, Chief Miller. Let's see what he has to offer. Thank you again, Chief Miller, for supporting the SA Matters mission. Head over to Instagram and follow Chief_Miller. Okay, if you're new to the show, stick around after the feature segment to learn some more about our mission, how you can attend or host a live event, and how to get connected with us on our social media. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, part one of my interview with firefighter Chris Baker. The story of how I got connected with Chris for this interview is interesting. I was and continue to be doing training for an oil refinery in Alberta, Canada. And it was during that training that one of my co-presenters showed a video of an incident at the Richmond Chevron Refinery. And it was rather impactful video of this event, and I ended up having a conversation with Chris about this video, and Chris said, I was at that incident. I was one of those firefighters. And I said, we've got to do a podcast. Would you please come and do a near miss podcast with me? And he agreed to, and now I'm just excited to have him on today to share a story. So let me give you a little bit of his bio here. Chris Baker has over 10 years of experience as a volunteer combination and career firefighter in California. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in anthropology and associate's degree in fire science command company officer. He is a California State Fire Training certified fire officer, driver operator, fire instructor, and lead firefighter 1 certification evaluator. Chris is a fire science instructor in the California Community College system. He is a member and educator of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, and he is a volunteer advocate Regional Manager, Region 9, California, Nevada, Arizona, and Hawaii, for the Everyone Goes Home program through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. So we're going to start this interview off by watching the video clip that was showed during my training with the oil refinery operators, of which we then take it and we dissect and learn the lessons for oil refinery operators. But I want you to see this recreated video of this incident that Chris was on. We'll start out with that video and then we'll segue into the interview.
The Chevron Richmond Refinery lies approximately 10 miles northeast of San Francisco in California's Contra Costa County. The 2,900-acre facility was initially established in 1902 and primarily makes transportation fuels such as gasoline and diesel, as well as lube oils. The refinery can process up to 250,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The first step of the refining process takes place in the Crude Unit, where crude oil is cleaned and heated before entering the distillation tower. Inside the tower, the crude oil is boiled. The vapor then condenses into various liquid hydrocarbon fractions, or streams, including jet fuel, diesel, and gas oil. The different streams exit the distillation tower through separate pipes or side cuts that lead to other sections of the refinery. On August 6, 2012, the crude unit was operating normally. Around 3:50 that afternoon, an operator was performing a routine check when he noticed a small puddle on the ground near the distillation tower. The liquid appeared to be dripping from an 8-inch insulated pipe 14 feet overhead. The leaking pipe was a section of the tower's number 4 side cut line, which operated at a temperature of 640 degrees Fahrenheit and contained light gas oil, a combustible liquid similar to diesel fuel. Chevron inspectors knew that over the years, the walls of the number 4 side cut had thinned due to corrosion, but they did not realize how close this particular segment was to failure. There was no shutoff valve between the pipe and the distillation tower, and no way to isolate the leak. The head operator was called to the scene. Although he believed the situation was serious, he did not believe the small leak warranted immediately shutting down the unit and stopping production. Following Chevron's standard practice for responding to hazardous leaks, refinery firefighters were sent to the scene. A number of managers, engineers, and technicians gathered there informally to assess the problem. The group discussed a recommendation from an operator to shut down the unit, but they decided to first try to pinpoint the leak by removing insulation from the pipe while the crude unit was still running. They hoped they could stop the leak with a temporary metal fitting known as a clamp. A Chevron firefighter tried using a pike pole to hook and pull away the insulation, but this poking action was deemed too dangerous because it was moving the pipe. The CSB later found that the tip of the pike likely caused a small puncture in the already thinned pipe. As the unit continued to operate, workers assembled scaffolding directly beneath the leaking pipe. 2 firefighters then used a hook to remove the insulation from the pipe. As they were working, hydrocarbon vapor began to flow out from underneath the insulation. The 2 firefighters backed away from the growing vapor cloud. As the hot vapor mixed with air, it ignited. That fire was quickly put out, and the 2 firefighters immediately climbed down off the scaffolding. But the exact location of the leak was still obscured by the remaining insulation and firefighting water. So the Chevron firefighters attempted to strip the insulation off the pipe with high-pressure water. But the leak suddenly worsened, and hot hydrocarbon liquid started to spray out of the pipe. A decision was finally made to begin an emergency shutdown of the crude unit. But it was too late. Suddenly, the pipe ripped open. A vapor cloud formed and rapidly expanded as the large inventory of hydrocarbons in the distillation tower started to vent through the ruptured pipe. The vapor cloud immediately spread over hundreds of feet, engulfing all 19 people who had gathered nearby. The firefighters and operators struggled to escape through the dense hydrocarbon cloud, unable to see. They had to feel their way out, some on their hands and knees. At approximately 6:30 p.m., 2 minutes after the huge vapor cloud formed, the hydrocarbons ignited. One firefighter was trapped inside a fire engine when it was suddenly engulfed in flames. He radioed for help.
Mayday, mayday, mayday! This is phone 60!
But when he received no response, he assumed everyone else was dead. To escape the inferno, he fled through what witnesses described as a wall of fire. Fortunately, all the workers would eventually flee to safety, and there were no fatalities.
Hey everyone, Rich Gasaway here, SA Matters Show. I'm with Chris Baker, and we're going to be talking about a very, very significant near-miss event that occurred when Chris worked at the Chevron Richmond oil refinery in 2012. And without any delay to it, Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gasaway. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate what you do for the fire service.
So, Chris, tell us a little bit about the refinery, kind of set up what this work environment is like for you as a firefighter / protection on-duty person in this plant. What's this facility like? What's the dangers like in a facility like this, just for folks that maybe have never schlepped around an oil refinery before?
Well, thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you for your mentorship. And I just saw you out at FDIC, and thank you for your conversation, and congratulations on another excellent class. The Chevron Richmond Refinery, I started there in August of 2011, and just like you and probably a majority of your listeners, I had no clue about a oil refinery, pressurized gas and flammable liquids. I only had a basic firefighter one understanding level. And so I received the position from CAL FIRE. I worked as a seasonal wildland firefighter, and I received the opportunity to go to Chevron Richmond Refinery. It's in the Bay Area. It's pretty close to the Oakland, San Francisco area, San Pablo Bay of California. And it was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening as far as hazards and as far as a multifaceted position. My position, my technical title was a fire security specialist. However, we were a firefighter, we were an engineer, we were an incident commander. Most of the times we were first on scene. Hazmat technician, we were part of the Petrochemical Mutual Aid Organization. The Contra Costa County area has 6 different refineries that operate within that county. And we were the only full-time 24-hour staffed fire department in that facility. Some of my duties were dispatch. So every 28 days we would cycle into different positions. It was a different schedule than most fire agencies. We worked a rotating 12-hour shift. So we would work days and nights, which was different, obviously, as far as workload. We did a lot of confined space permitting, hot work permitting. My position was basically a field fire marshal, per se, heavy into prevention. And that facility is one of the largest refineries on the West Coast. And that's also the facility for Chevron Research. So we also have a facility that has 1,500 plus laboratories. And so we would do hot work permits, high heat permits, confined space permits. We would work, as far as with catalysts, with columns, with 5,000 contractors that would come from all over the world, security issues, lockouts, tagouts. We were basically wore about 30 different hats at the facility. The facility produces 288,000 barrels a day in a 24-hour period. Our facility does all the gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. They have direct lines that go to both SFO and Oakland airports. A lot of the products that we use are used all over the Bay Area, all over California. And then we also have a lot of chemicals that we work with. Right next door is General Chemical. So we do a lot with sulfuric acid, for example. We have a lot of hydrogen sulfide that was on the refinery, a lot of nitrogen. Obviously, we use nitrogen to purge columns, to do catalyst changes. During a pit stop or a shutdown, you literally could have your population go from 1,800 employees to 5,000 employees. So the fire department will respond to any medical emergencies. Again, if there is any technical jobs, we would go out. We had a very skilled technical team. We did a lot of confined space rescue, high angle rescue, and some of the best firefighters I've ever worked with. If you're talking about high angle rescue and trying to fit into small spaces and 300-foot columns, these are the firefighters that you'd want to work with to help rescue in some of these situations.
Prior to the event that we're going to be discussing, did you have any other, what I would call significant emergencies that you responded to up to that point, or was this the first one of significance for you?
I think it's hard to justify that because this significant incident was the biggest incident I've ever had in my career. And there's several incidents, but in my understanding, I just started in August of 2011. So I'd only been at the refinery for about a year. And the work, the hazardous work that takes place in a refinery is eye-opening. Propane, butane, methane, all of your light ends, your jet fuels, all the characteristics, the flammability, the flashover temperatures. Every chemical has different unique characteristics. We had a couple incidents as a day shift fire marshal going out and permitting jobs. There's certain safety protocols that we have to go through, certain refinery instructions. When we go out to certify a job, we have to do a gas tech. We test for either sulfur. We test for H2S, hydrogen sulfide. We'll test for, say, nitrogen, if it's in a nitrogen area. We'll test for LEL, lower explosive limit. We have to make sure that, drains are covered, the process sewer drains. We have to make sure that, all of the shut line procedures, everything's been isolated. A lot of the jobs, as a day shift fire marshal, I walked to every job. And if it meant going up 20 flights of stairs to go gas test a job and to make sure all the protocols were in place, I did. Anytime I signed a permit, I would go through the process of making sure that everything was isolated, everything was approved. And there's multiple layers. There's multiple layers that have to give approval to do a hot work job. So I had some experience to jobs that might have been done inappropriately, or maybe they didn't have the proper sign-offs, or maybe they didn't have a charged hose line. Maybe they didn't have a fire watch. Maybe they didn't have a fire extinguisher. Maybe they didn't have a rescue plan or an escape plan in case there was a bad incident. So as a day shift fire marshal, you would see, on average, you'd probably see 100 jobs a week. And our job was to keep the people in the refinery, the workers, the contractors, and to keep the city of Richmond safe if there ever was an incident. So yes, I'd seen some jobs, and it really taught me a lot about prevention and being a fire marshal. And some of the jobs you would have to follow up on, and you would have to make sure that the certain systems were in place before you can sign off and give approval. Okay, so set up for me the day of the incident. What was time of year, what the temperature was like outside, how many people were on duty that would be firefighters, in the facility, what you were doing that day, how you got notified about what was happening, just kind of set it all up. Okay, so as we're recording this this video podcast, this vlog, it'll be the 6-year anniversary coming up here pretty soon, and this is the first time that I've talked about this incident in public. So I apologize if I'm, emotional, or if I'm very passionate about this subject, but this incident changed my life. So August 6, 2012, I remember it like it was yesterday. Literally, like, there's not a day that goes by I don't think about it. So this was a Monday. I was on B shift. We have 4 different shifts that work at a refinery. We have A shift, B shift, C shift, and D shift. And so our schedule is crazy, the way it rotates, and you rotate from days and nights, and literally some days you don't know if it's day or nighttime, just with the way that we follow operations. So whatever the operation schedule, again, a refinery doesn't stop. A refinery runs 365, 24/7, and there's so many plants and processes that you can't shut down a refinery. So it was a Monday, which is a very busy day. It's permit heavy. We start our shift at 4:30 in the morning, which is a little bit different for your typical fire agency. And I usually get to work about an hour early. And I like to get to work because of traffic, because of the Bay Area, because there's always traffic. And so being new, I was on probation. We have an 18-month probation. So I got to work super early, make sure the coffee's on, make sure that I have all my equipment. I check my gas tester. And we carry about $10,000 worth of equipment. We carry an ultra-ray gas tester, a Mercury Jerome tester, our ITX 4 gas tester, making sure we have all of our equipment, make sure we have all of our PPE, make sure our vehicle is set up. And then when you're working at nighttime, you have to make sure that you have everything that you need to go walk jobs. And everything we have is portable, mobile. We have to climb columns and vessels, and some of the columns and vessels will probably take you half an hour to probably get to the top of some of the columns and vessels. So it's very important to make sure your equipment works, because you would hate to get to the top of a column and then have something that doesn't work. And then you have to climb all the way back down and get your equipment. So you check your equipment out, you make sure you're ready for the day, and then you get turnover. We want to get turnover from the night shift. Hey, is there any jobs that are going on that I need to know about? Any technical jobs, high heat jobs? Do we have any special precautions? Anything going on in the plant? I was assigned to the North Yard that day, which the North Yard is very, very busy. Isomax, South Isomax, North Isomax, Alky, all of your RLOP, your Richmond Lube oil plant, your sulfur plant that we have at the refinery, which has H2S, hydrogen sulfide. So the North Yard is very complex as far as your hazards. So you get your turnover from your relief. They're tired. They've been up all night working, obviously, and you start your day. And then once you leave the firehouse, we respond in a quick response vehicle, a monitor truck. And normally in the North Yard, I don't leave the North Yard. I usually process anywhere from 20 to 30 permits, 20 to 30 jobs, literally from about 5 o'clock till about 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's very permit heavy. And the amount of workload that you do in that 2 to 3 hour time period is probably what somebody would do in a 12-hour time period, just to kind of give you kind of an insight to the workload. Normally our turnover is at 16:30 in the afternoon. And as a rookie, coming in early, the best thing that you could give your relief is an early relief. And so some of your coworkers would respect that, and they would come in and relieve you at 4:30 because of traffic. Literally, it would take about 2 hours to get home. So on a 12-hour shift, you probably won't be getting home till about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, just to kind of put it in perspective with Bay Area traffic. So that day, permits were done. We usually have a little bit of downtime, soft time. No Barca loungers, no TVs, no like a typical firehouse. I mean, you're literally working the whole time. So between about 1500, 1530, you might get some downtime, and you work on reports. If you have any emails, you just do desk work, basically. Wash your truck, get everything ready for your relief to come in. And we got the call about 1600. We got a call for a diesel leak, and it was for crude. And Fort Crude is the first step of the refinery. So Richmond Long Wharf is the only long wharf in the San Pablo Bay. We can actually receive 4 oil tankers. And a lot of tankers come to our long wharf to unload in order to go up the channel to go to other refineries. So we're a very busy port. And so the long wharf is where the crude comes in. And the first place that it goes in the refinery is Fort Crude. And we have something called a desalter. So the crude comes in, and all the water and all the everything that basically that gets taken from the crude, and the crude gets refined there, and then it gets sent to other plants, Isomax, North Isomax, Arlop. It'll go to different plants once it goes from Fort Crude. So we got a call that there was about a 44 drips per minute leak of diesel at Fort Crude. And honestly, being a traditional firefighter, my first inclination was to jump on our foam 60, our $1 million, 1,200 gallon, 3,500 GPM specialized foam engine. And my engineer had to remind me that we take our separate vehicles. We take quick response vehicles. So that was kind of the first kind of, thing that was kind of different for me, going from an organized fire department to something that's kind of specialized as this. I was one of the first ones that showed up on scene. I set up the initial isolation area. My captain showed up, Unit 1, and then my engineer showed up with foam 60. We helped with doing the front suction, setting up the foam pumper with multiple intakes. To be able to have 3,500 GPM capabilities, you have to well out all the hydrants and set up all of the engines. I did the initial ultra-ray testings for benzene, C6, H6, and tested the initial levels. And then my captain and my battalion chief, they were working with the head operators of the plant to try to find out really more information. What's going on? What line is it? Trying to gather that information. So at approximately about 16:30, my battalion chief came to me and said, "Hey, Chris, you should probably call Heather. You should probably call your wife and let her know you're probably going to be late." And so I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Sure, chief." And I was like, so I left the IDLH area. There's certain places that you can't have cell phones. So I went to an area to where I could, call my wife, and she's like, "Hey, babe, I'm not going to be home. We got an incident, and as soon as we got this patch up, I'll call you." So about 16:30.
Hold on a second. 44 drips a minute. In the industrial firefighting world, is that a big deal, or was that kind of, it's I'm trying to equate it like in structural firefighting. Is that like a sparking outlet, food on the stove, kitchen fire, or or fully involved? Where are we at with put it into context of? I mean, you don't have to use the same example, but.
So my context, I've only been on the job for about 12 months, a year. I was still on probation, still green, still wet behind the ears, still new. And reading my coworkers, my captain, my battalion chief, people that have been there for 30 years, reading them to see if this is an incident or not. And really at first it was a leak. We didn't really, we didn't have a lot of information. It wasn't really confirmed. It was a small leak, and it wasn't like it was flowing. It was more just like a small leak of diesel. And so, when my battalion chief told me to call my wife, I kind of knew that this might be a little bit something more. But again, my level, 2012 to where I am now, to me, it didn't seem like it was a huge priority. Like it was going to be a big incident. So I called my wife, told her, came back. By that time, about 15 minutes into it, our brigade started showing up. So working with the brigade, we had about 60 brigade members that work in different various facilities, and they've all gone through our training. They've gone through TEACs. Texas A&M. They've gone through 1081. They've gone through flammable liquids and pressurized gas training, and a lot of your Firefighter 1 training. A lot of them are volunteers for other departments off the refinery, and a lot of them are propeller heads. You're talking about scientists and engineers, and if you want to know about chemical compounds and stuff like that, these are the propeller heads that basically invented some of the stuff for the refinery. So they're very knowledgeable. And then my boss came to me and said, "Hey, Bake, do you want to stay? Because we're on overtime." Because with our 12-hour shift, around 16:30, our relief was getting ready to show up. And, I thought about it, and I was like, no, I don't want to leave. Like, my crew was there, my captain was there, my battalion chief, like B shift, everybody from B shift was there. So, I, told my wife that I was going to be working overtime and, I'd be home later. So he did ask me, he went around and asked everybody if we were okay with staying over. And then that's kind of another inclination that I got, like, okay, maybe this might be a little more in depth. This might be something a little bit more, than just a small leak. So from that time period, we set up our hose lines. We made sure and set up our hose lines. We got our fire brigade situated. We had like a loss prevention self-assessment is what we call it. We have a checklist that we go through. And all of us at the refinery, Chevron, they have this process to where we could do a stop work authority. So all of us have this opportunity to where if we see anything or if anything is unusual, we can have a safety huddle. We can talk about it. And we had one of those. We talked about some of the risk factors. We talked about some of the hazards, the dangers. We kind of had an idea that if this did, end up being an incident within an incident, that, this is what our safety protocols, this is what we have in place to deal with those things.
Okay. And then, so what was the result of the huddle up? Was then an action plan was developed?
So we have we follow the ICS system, and we have the incident command system. And so as far as an incident action plan and calling in more resources, the city of Richmond, they respond. We're part of petrochemical mutual aid organization, so other refineries can respond. And then there's several departments in Contra Costa County. So between El Cerrito and Pinole, Crockett, Carquinez, which is a volunteer department, Rodeo Hercules, there's several different departments that have also been trained, gone through 1081, and we all train together. So whenever we have an incident, those things are put into place so where we can call those resources in case we have a bigger incident. So there was a lot of things that were happening above my pay grade. And to be honest, I was on the nozzle. I was the firefighter that day. And honestly, I wasn't in a lot of those conversations or those discussions. And I was on the nozzle. My eyes were forward. I was looking at this leak. And honestly, I really didn't know what I didn't know. So for me, I wouldn't necessarily say tunnel vision, but, there's a leak. I have a charged hose line, and my captain basically had me wash the diesel down our bio drain, so to our bioreactor, process sewer drain. So that was my initial assignment, per se. And then as the brigade started coming, as all these different resources started coming, then that's kind of when the complexity of the incident kind of increased.
Okay. Did it increase because of the resources coming in, or did it increase because the leak got worse?
So from that point on, in the video and the animation, you can kind of see this unfolding. There were several huddles with plant operators, head operators, the people that run for Crude, the people that are in charge of that part of the refinery. In order to understand for Crude, things are operating at really high temperatures. It's really hard just to shut a line down. That one line, the four-side cut line, there was no way to isolate that line. Literally, you would have to shut the whole plant down to isolate that line. And me being new, wet behind the ears, not used to a refinery, obviously having a lot of questions, but also understanding that it's a very complex process, that you can't just shut something down that's operating at those pressures and operating at those temperatures. And so that line, that four-side cut line, it took us a little while to figure out that that was the actual line that was leaking. There was some tactics that were used to be able to strip away the insulation off of that pipe to see what was actually leaking. And in the past, what was used was clamps. So usually the process would be for a leak is that they would try to pull away the insulation, and then they would clamp that leak to prevent the leak. So again, it's easier when things are operating at that pressure and at 6,000 degrees just to clamp it running. And so obviously all these things were above my pay grade and my experience level. And a lot of those engineers that were part of our brigade, they could understand some of those processes. So the plant, the four crew, the operators, the incident commander, under unified command, they were working on trying to shut that plant down, trying to expose the insulation from that pipe, that four-side cut, and then they were trying to come up with a strategy to be able to clamp that line to be able to stop that leak.
Okay. And so was it determined that the clamps wouldn't work, or they did try to clamp it?
So in the video, you'll see that there was some scaffolding that was made. There was two firefighters that went up, and they tried to expose the insulation from the pipe, and we had a flare up. And I was on the nozzle, and I was the one that initially put out the fire from the flare up. And anytime that you're working with pressurized gas or flammable liquid, your goal isn't really to put out the initial fire. Your goal is to keep it in check. We use fog streams, and we're trying to capture and contain some of those vapors, those flammable vapors. So the two firefighters came down the scaffolding, and then basically from that point, that's when we really had an incident within an incident. That was the first time that I saw actual fire on that incident.
Okay. And was that able to be put into check pretty quick, or did it just escalate from there?
From there, we're probably right around, I would probably, the time period was probably, maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes from that time period. We were able to keep that fire. We were able to capture and control it. We were able to get the firefighters to safety from there. And then from that time period, from that standpoint, that's basically when we had the release was a little bit after that standpoint. So from there, once the insulation basically was stripped from the pipes, from the four side cut pipe, we had a vapor cloud, and 19 of us in that ideal H area were trapped in this vapor cloud. So from the nozzle standpoint, I felt this huge heat. One of my fellow brigade members, his helmet was completely knocked off. Your first inclination is to take your equipment off. Like literally my gear, my gloves, my helmet, my structure jacket, my mask, everything was just incredibly hot. And so I remember kind of like the shock factor. You can't see. It's really high pressurized steam, and the sounds, literally the valves breaking, the vent fan decks breaking. Literally, you have a whole plant that's just basically with pressure and with heat. Things are going to relief. We have different reliefs that are set up, flares that are set up. The flares started lighting off, and I reverted back to my base training. I followed the hose line back to the foam pumper, and I got to foam 60, and literally within about 120 seconds, about 2 minutes, that vapor cloud ignited.
Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 65,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in an environment that's high risk and high consequence, I'm here to help you improve your safety and your survival. And I want to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you. I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank those companies, organizations, and agencies that have hosted some recent situational awareness matters training for their team members. The I-Women's Conference in Tysons, Virginia, Fire Rescue Med in Henderson, Nevada, the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association in Columbus, Ohio, and the Evansville Fire Department in Evansville, Indiana. If you're interested in attending any of our upcoming programs, on August 10th, I'll be at Fire Rescue International in Dallas, Texas. August 11 and 12 at the Northwest Fire District in Houston, Texas. August 13 through 16, Missouri City Fire Department, Missouri City, Texas. August 17 and 18, League City Fire Department in League City, Texas. August 20 through 25, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, Honolulu, Hawaii. September 13th, Eagle Materials in Grapevine, Texas. September 17 to 18, Odessa Fire Department in Odessa, Texas. September 22nd, Columbia Shuswap Regional District, Alberta, Canada. And September 29, the Badger Firefighters Association Conference in West Bend, Wisconsin. To see the locations of all the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stops, just head over to the SA Matters website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there's several ways you can do that. Just go to the show notes to see how to get connected through our newsletter membership, podcast subscription, YouTube subscribers, or how to follow our Facebook page, our Twitter feed, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 224 of the SA Matters show is complete. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, Midwest Fire and Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations that have hosted live situational awareness programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted the virtual, internet-based training programs. Thank you to the more than 2,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed SA Matters Online Academy. And most importantly, thank you, the viewers and listeners of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.